Hey friends, downsizing is pretty straightforward, but I thought I would break it down, recap, and review it anyway, as I quite enjoyed this film despite it not really being my style per se, but it was pretty fresh and completely different to what I thought it was going to be. Spoilers, like duh. Quick plot! In the near future, a scientist named Jorgen Abjorgibson, along with his partner Andreas Jacobson, invent a way to reduce the size of particles. Blah blah blah. We can shrink people! Like Honey, I Shrunk the Kids, except not quite that small, about 5 inches give or take per person. This process is called downsizing. This was all an effort to combat global warming. Smaller people means less waste, less consumption, less pollution. Yeah! Several years later, a bunch of little communities had been established, which are more or less like biodomes that shield the little peeps from the harsh sun and bugs and things that might wreck a shrunken person's day, like cats, rats, birds, and so on. These miniaturized communities are just like our normal world, except much more clean and safe. See, one of the benefits of being small is that everything is cheaper to make, like homes and smart cars and electronics. Like, imagine how expensive it would be to have a giant mansion that can rotate, or to dig an Olympic-sized swimming pool, and so on, which relatively to the mini people, it's a lot cheaper. So if you have quite a bit of savings, once shrunk, it will translate into a significant fortune, relatively. Think of it like buying a doll's house, few $100. Now imagine if you shrunk down and lived in that doll's house. That's kind of what's going on here. Not to mention food, medicine, and all the other things as well. This basically means that your average middle-class citizen could shrink and live out the rest of their lives as millionaires. Relatively, of course. We get introduced to our lead, Paul, played by
Damon,
and his wife, who are struggling to get by and are fed up with their mundane life, so they decide to downsize. But at the last minute, Paul's wife chickens out and bails on Paul. But it's too late for Paul, cause he's already shrunk. Bummer, dude. His wife later divorces him, and due to a dodgy settlement, Paul loses a substantial amount of his wealth. So instead of living the sweet high life in his fancy new mansion, he ends up in a small apartment and back in a crappy mundane job. So instead of escaping his boring middle class life, he ends up back in a boring middle class life, only this time alone. And tiny! Oh, so cute. So let's just knock the ending on the head, then talk characters a bit. Turns out only about 3% of the world embraced downsizing, and so Jorgen Abjorgibson's plan to save the planet ultimately failed. Too little, too late, as they say. The world is going to end, but as a backup, Jorgensen and his scientific gang built a massive underground vault. Massive compared to the downsized people, that is. In order for the world to right itself again, to create a new cycle and become habitable once more, it will take around 8,000 years, apparently. So Jorgen and his community plan to stay in the bunker for several millennia, creating generation after generation of small people until it is safe to come out again. Pretty brutal. So even though we get a bit of a happy ending with Paul finding true love, it's still pretty sad, as we know in a few hundred years every other creature on Earth, including humans, will be dead. Unless, of course, the other nations are smart enough to build their own vaults and downsize as well, which is probably a reality, seeing as the technology is widely available. So there is this underlying theme of fate that happens towards the end of the movie. Paul, being hopelessly lost and in a massive rut, thinks his life is over, that he is a pathetic, purposeless nobody. Of course, it doesn't help when his rich, party animal neighbor Dusan, played hilariously by Christoph Waltz, keeps telling him this exact thing. But in an odd turn of events, he meets this strange woman, Loc Nung Tran, and being good-natured by heart, decides to help her out. Ngoc was a political activist in Vietnam, but due to a corrupt government and her ruffling too many feathers, Ngoc was downsized and human trafficked into America. Everyone but her died in the journey. Paul and Ngoc start to fall for each other, then end up having love fuck. Very nice. At the end of the film, Paul decides to join Jorgen and the hippies in the vault. He thinks this will give his life purpose, meaning he will be one of the few that can continue the human race, literally contribute to the repopulation and sustainability of humanity, prolonging the extinction. But as we know, at the last minute he decides not to. He realizes that there is no true purpose in life, per se. He doesn't need to achieve anything great. He doesn't need to be anything other than himself, Paul Safranik, to be happy. So we get a heartwarmingly tragic, happy, sad ending. Paul finds true love and, just as importantly, contentment, even happiness in his life, in his existence. But the whole world and everyone on it are going to die, but not for a few hundred years. So we can take solace in knowing that Paul and Ngoc will be long dead and dissolved by then. Yay! This movie took me by surprise, as based on the trailers, it kind of makes it look more like a comedy than a weird drama thing. I expected jokes about big things and like, oh no, I'm small and big things are after me, like Honey, I Shrunk the Kids, I guess. I mean, we get a few few of those here and there which are cute and humorous, but the movie is more than just that. It's a weird midlife crisis and coming to terms with one's own mediocrity drama kind of thing, but with the sci-fi feature of a shrinking machine. It's quite strange, but quite enjoyable. I could have used more shrunk people and big thing jokes or situations, but then that would have taken away from the serious issues in this movie, and we've seen a lot of that before. So yeah, overall, Downsizing was a fun and heartwarming film. I give it 4 out of 6 giant Smirnoff bottles. What did you think of Downsizing? Oh, better question. Would you downsize to live the rest of your life as a millionaire or stay big? I think I'd probably stay big. I don't know. What would you do?